So good morning. We're looking at the communications unit again today. We're actually going to be looking at learning outcome 3, but before we do that, I'd like to just quickly scan over what we have been doing over the past few days. We've looked at learning outcome 1, where it's all about how you communicate in a health and social care organisation. We looked at principles of effective communication, different models, formal, informal communication, barriers to technology, and how you propose changes or solutions to those barriers, and so on in that section. So that was all about how you communicate. Yesterday, we looked at how we can interact orally, spoken with individuals in a health and care setting. So we looked at different styles of oral communication, like formal, informal, your body language. We looked at how to demonstrate appropriate listening skills, where you would sit squarely in front of someone. We looked at the SOLAR model for that, where you would maintain eye contact. And then we looked at a few other things like what type of technologies would help us to facilitate a good interaction. Now, going on today, it's the final learning outcome for the communications unit. So there are 4 assessment criteria, 2 in the pass, 1 for the merit and 1 for the distinction. So the first ones we're going to be doing is explain the uses of different forms of written communication in a healthcare setting. 3.2 is communicate information using appropriate written styles and methods. The merit question, 3M1, use appropriate technology and supporting graphs, diagrams, or artwork to support written communication. And 3D1 distinction is evaluate examples of different forms of actual written communication found in health and social care settings. So what you'll notice is this section, Learning Outcome 3, is all about written communication. So we've done oral communication, we talked about interaction, and now we're going on to the written communication that takes place. So if everybody's okay, we'll make a start on the PowerPoint. So learning outcome 3, be able to communicate information in writing. So I'm going to go over a couple of slides where it tells us what the written communication is and the principles that we can use to make our written communication more effective. So health services need to keep good written records of the care given to patients for 3 main reasons. And these reasons are to make sure that the care and treatment can continue to be given safely. So it doesn't matter who's on duty. If Simone's on duty in the morning, Arista can come back the next morning and see what medicine or what treatment Simone gave to her patient. So it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your written communication should be put down as clearly as possible so that the other person coming in does not get confused and they can actually just continue. So it's a nice loop that goes on. It's also to record the care that has been given to the patient and to make sure there's an accurate record to be used as evidence if there's ever a complaint about any sort of care that a patient might have received. So a patient might say to you, I wasn't given my medication at 3 p.m. My care worker didn't come and give it to me. But you can actually dispute that and say, actually, on our records over here, it shows that you were given the correct medication at the correct time, and so on. So it helps you, it covers your backs. Now, the principles of written communication. Now, this is how you should be writing. So you need to write as near as possible to the time you delivered the care. So that means if I'm writing it now, if I've given the treatment to a patient now, I should more or less really, as soon as I've given it, write it down, or as quickly as I can. So don't leave it an hour. You need to just try and do it in the next few minutes. Write simply and clearly. Write legibly. So do nice, neat handwriting and try not to make any errors, especially if you're typing it into a computer, like spelling or spacing errors. Put the dates and times in as accurately as possible. Don't give your own personal opinions to any written record that you're writing, and avoid writing any judgmental things that you might have made a judgment or something that's abusive or insulting inside the record. You might not have had a very good experience with the patient, but there's no point in writing it on the record that this patient was rude and swore at me, because there's different things available, complaint forms available for that. So for your actual record, you just write it as factually as possible. So are we okay on how our written communication should take place?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So this leads on to 3.1, where we're going to look at different forms of written communication. So 3.1 is explain the uses of different forms of written communication in a health and care setting. So for this one, what you're going to be doing is your written communications are quite an important part of when you're working with individuals or in early years, like we mentioned yesterday. You're asked for examples, you're writing a care plan, or you're making a daily report. It's just really important that you actually put this down. In my educational experience, many years ago when I was working in a particular place, with it was a year one setting. What happened is a little child who had a lot of specific needs and he needed sanitary care. Now, the issue at that time was that the child's mother would always say that this child is coming home dirty, he's not being looked after, he's not being cleaned up as much as possible. But what we had to implement in then was a little record book where every time that he was looked at and every time that he was cleaned up or changed, it would be noted in that. And it did actually stop the complaints, because it was shown that maybe he's been getting at least twice a day, he was taken aside and cleaned up and brought back as fresh as possible. So that actually covered that issue at that time. So this is the sort of same sort of thing, so you're just covering yourselves. With health services, you need to keep good written records of the care given to the patients, again, for three main reasons. So like we said earlier, so that care can be given continuously. You're recording all the care that's been given, and you're making sure that you have a record as an evidence. Now, the ex-Royal College of Nursing has actually said there are principles of written communication, like we mentioned earlier again. Just write simply, clearly, make sure your handwriting is neat, don't make any typing mistakes, put dates and times, don't give your own personal opinions, and don't write anything that's judgmental or abusive in your records. And also remember, as part of the healthcare team, you have a responsibility to make sure that everything you write about a patient or that any other member of staff writes remains confidential and is not accessed by an unauthorized person. So in this, what it means is that if you might find out some personal information about something that a client or a patient might be going through, that doesn't mean that you're going to go and tell another member of staff in another department, or go and tell your family members, oh, did you know what happened today? So you've got to keep it as confidential as possible and only speak to the authorized people. And when we say unauthorized person, that they can't be accessed, don't leave records lying around. Don't keep, if you're using a computer, make sure that you log out after you've actually used it so that nobody else can actually access anything that you've done. It just saves you from getting into trouble yourselves. Right? Now we're going to look at good writing skills, and these create good impressions. So you've got to pay careful attention to how the text is presented, using a good typeface for font and size. So if I was to write something in a record, I wouldn't go and start using italic as a font, or all those fancy curly font styles. I would just possibly stick to Arial, which is what we normally do, and just have it as simple and easy to look at. If I was writing it, I'd make sure that my handwriting is my best handwriting. I take my time and actually spell out and write out in beautiful handwriting as much as I could. Use the correct grammar, punctuation and spelling. What this does is when I see somebody with a good, nice, neat handwriting with good grammar, it does, as a person, it does give me confidence in that person, that this person is competent, they know what they're doing, they're able to get on with their job properly. If you're writing scruffily and you're not doing your spellings properly, sometimes, even though we shouldn't be judgmental, people do make judgments and say, right, this person probably has no clue what's going on. It rushes through everything. Let's just go and keep a better eye on them. You've also got to be mindful of the style of writing that you use. Do you need to use formal writing? Do you need to use informal writing? Should it be short and sweet and just say, meds given 3 p.m.? Or do you need to say what particular medication it was, how much dose you gave, and at what time you gave it? So it really depends on what sort of situations you're in. Also, the language that you use is important, because you might not want to use jargon because somebody else that comes to look at the reports after you, they may not be as trained as you, they might be from another department. So not everybody understands the same jargon or the abbreviations, as I would say. Is everybody okay with what jargon actually means?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Simone, are you okay with it?
No.
No. I'll explain what jargon means. Jargon is like when you're cutting a word short. Do you know what it is that if instead of me saying health and social care, I would say HSC. That is me cutting something short. Or like yesterday.
Abbreviations. No.
Yeah, abbreviation, yeah. So you're just making it a lot shorter instead of doing the whole word.
Okay.
Fantastic. Is that okay? So we'll go on to the next part. So specialist communication. Now, we're going to look at what practitioners and early year settings practitioners do to have different interactions with their individuals. So because there's a whole lot of people that you'll come in contact with, ranging from different ages. So everybody's going to have different needs. Somebody might have hearing issues. Somebody might be sight impaired. You might have someone who is extremely young and doesn't understand big words, like a 3 or a 4-year-old. So you're going to have to simplify your language for them. So it depends on how you interact with them. One example of this is Braille. That is used for people who have a sight impairment, that they may be blind or they might not be able to see very clearly. Now, just to recap, Braille is where you have little dots or raised bits on the paper where they touch them and they can read by touch, feel them over the finger. So I'll just read this section, it'll explain it a lot clearly. So Braille is used by individuals who are blind or visually impaired and are unable to access materials in print, so they can't read written text. It is important as it enables individuals to read and write independently. Braille uses raised dots to represent the letters of the alphabet, numbers and punctuation marks, and these can be read and written by touch. So Braille has been adapted to many different languages, and it can actually be used for music and maths as well. What I've seen in my experiences is fantastic aids that you can use for actually teaching children Braille. In my experience, I've seen children as young as 3 and 4 have a Braille typewriter where they can actually touch each individual key, and they're taught to actually use that to be able to continue their work, and then they're taught to be able to read it as well. We actually have something called the RNIB, which is an abbreviation, jargon. So Royal National Institute of Blind People, and they're the charity for blind people and those who have like sight issues, along with people that support them and family members. And what they do is for free, They actually give individuals and families and people who support these people training and also resources. They put them on courses where they can go and learn Braille. They can give them things that can actually help them out to actually to learn Braille and actually write it. So it's a fantastic service that they offer. Are we all okay so far?
Yes.
Is any questions up to now?
No.
Fantastic, I'll carry on then. So again, another specialist communication is sign language. So I'm pretty sure that we'd have seen, even on TV now, with the children's programs, where you have Mr. Tumble, if you're aware of him, if you have small children. What he does is he'll speak orally, but then he'll also sign a lot of different things. So what that does is it teaches children to learn sign language from a very young age, and it encourages them to communicate with other people. So it's fantastic what that program is. So the most common form that we use in Britain is BSL, which is British Sign Language. It's recognised by the UK government, and it was actually recognised as a language in March 2003, which it wasn't before that. You can use it in English, Gaelic and Welsh. Obviously, there's differences in what signs you do. It has its own grammar and sentence structure, and that's completely different to what we use in English. There's also something called Makaton that can be used. That's slightly different, but that's used elsewhere. So sign language is used by individuals who are deaf or hearing impaired, and it's a form of communication that uses gestures, facial expressions, and body languages to communicate. So that was 3.1, where we looked at different forms of written communication. Obviously, we need to adapt it for sign language. So if we're all okay, I'll carry on to 3.2. And on here, we're actually going to be communicating information using appropriate written styles and methods. This one is actually quite a simple one. When you get to the assignment, I think you'll enjoy this one very much because it's not too difficult. What you're going to do is you're going to make use of one of the written styles and methods of written communication. So there's things like letters, emails, reports, information reports. Now, for this, I will explain a lot more clearly tomorrow. All you're going to do is you're going to include a couple of examples of either a letter that is sent to a patient for an appointment, or make a letter yourself and say, "Dear sir, you have an appointment on the 5th of December at this department for this. Please contact us if you have any issues, and yours kindly," and then sign off onto it. You could possibly, now people are getting contacted by email, have an example of an email. You could find a patient record on the internet and include that as an image, or you could find an image or a prescription to include that. So all you're doing is you're looking at different written styles and methods of what communication is available. So that was simply 3.2, quite a simple one. Is everybody clear on this section?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Simone, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Arista, I'm guessing you're okay. You'll put yourself on mute, but okay. Let's go on to 3.3 M1. Again, this one is quite a good one as well. It is quite simplified. The learning outcome 3 you'll see after a whole lot of writing that you do in LO1 and LO2. It's quite nice, and it's a bit of a breath of fresh air where you can just calm down a little bit after all that writing. So what we're going to do is use appropriate technology and supporting graphs, diagrams, and /or artwork to support written communication. So what you're going to do here is you're going to use one of the software programs to enhance communication using images. Now, when you do your PowerPoint, you can actually include a few images and graphs within that, which will cover this. Or you could just add in examples of a table, a graph, an image, something like a patient record, an MRI scan. Fantastic, Carissa. Or an X-ray report. So what you would do is you're just going to include some images into this section, and then, so for example, in my assignment, what I would do is I'd include an image of an X-ray, and then I would explain what this X-ray is for. And then I might also include a graph of somebody's daily record of, if they have diabetes, their insulin records, what sort of levels they are during the week. Then I would explain this is for patient X, and this is the daily record of over the past 7 days, showing what they're doing, what their results have been. So again, this is quite a simple one. So 3.2 is where you're including some images of written communication, and 3M1 is where you're using some graphs or some pictures. Is this okay so far? Before I go into D1, the distinction question?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Please stop me and interrupt if you do feel that if you've got any questions to ask. Don't be worried about asking something as I'm going through. So 3D1, evaluate examples of different forms of actual written communication found in healthcare settings. So on here, what you would do is you'd use some communication. I had changed it, it's not saved it. So you'd use some things like records, patient records, or any sort of like different writing forms of writing, like a letter or an email or an appointment letter, or even a chart that has been sent through. Or sometimes you get through your post healthy eating material where it shows what type of foods are good for you to eat or what type of foods are not good for you to eat. So any type of actual different written communication, and you're just going to look at them and you're going to evaluate them. You're going to say, is this effective? Is this not effective? I'll get into a little bit more to exactly what else can go into that. Things that can be part of this is record keeping. And again, they're saying that there's reasons for keeping records. There's many reasons that it's a good idea to keep a record, but two above all are the most important, is to make a complete record of the patient's journey through the services and to enable continuity of care. So if a patient has had surgery in a hospital and now they're going to be put into outer care where nurses are visiting them in their home, or if they've got healthcare professionals doing home visits, then that record will actually help to have the same continuity of care. They're not starting from scratch again. So the records that we keep in healthcare need to be clear, accurate, honest and timely, like we've gone over previously. And there's different ways to keep records. So some people can do handwritten records, others are doing computer-based. So you'll be expected to do whatever it is that needs to be done within your own employers. So you'll need to know how to use their computer systems. You'll need to know how to protect yourself when you're using those computer systems, like making sure you log out, don't give your password to anyone, or sometimes you have little smart cards or cards that will actually let you log on to certain systems. And also make sure if you've got written records that they're not left in a public place where anybody can actually see them, like we mentioned earlier. So these are some points that we've gone back over about why it's important to do records. So that was learning outcome 3 so far. Does anybody have any questions about what we've gone over so far?
Yes, me, teacher.
Mm-hmm.
How we need to do this homework in PowerPoint?
Yeah. Do you mean like how long you have to do it or how much writing you have to do?
Where we need to do this in PowerPoint?
I'll show you. What I'm going to do is I'll go over it. I will go into it with a lot of detail tomorrow, but I'll tell you what we're going to be doing. In tomorrow's lesson, I'm going to go over a PowerPoint which tells us exactly what needs to be done in our assignment.
Yeah.
Task 1 is slightly different and task 2 and 3. So task 1 is learning outcome 1, and learning outcome 2 and learning outcome 3 are a little bit more different. So you're doing them on different things. So you do a PowerPoint for learning outcome 1, but then you'll do written, like Word document for the other 2. I will set this assignment out tomorrow, which will be the 2nd of December, and it will be due back for the 16th of December. What I'll do tomorrow in the assignment days, I'll actually tell you what sort of words, how many words I'm actually expecting for each section, and that will help you with the, how much you actually need to be writing as well. Now, what I'll do is I'll go back onto our specification sheet. My mind went blank then, and then I'll show. So does everybody know where to get the spec sheet from now on Moodle? Or would you like me to show you again? Yeah? Fantastic. So on the specification sheet, obviously, because we go through it, and I know I do this every single lesson, it's just I want to make sure that you don't lose out on information that will support you. So this section here is what we've gone through. When we go further down, you'll notice that in it says LO3, communicate in writing, information in writing, and all it says on here, there's not a lot of detail. It just says written styles and methods, use formal or academic reports, informal reports, letters, emails, use a good structure of materials. Like what you would do is if you're making a PowerPoint, you put a footnote in, but I can show you how to do that. It's not difficult. Use software to enhance communication. So when you do your PowerPoint for learning outcome 1, that will cover some of this. Use images and graphs and tables. So learning outcome 3 is quite simple and straightforward because a lot of it will get answered with your use of images and supporting graphs and so on within that. But then again, I promise I will explain extremely clearly in the assignment lesson tomorrow.
Sorry, is it possible to have like sample graphs or what the images will look like tomorrow?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Fine.
What I'll do is I'll give you some examples. Let me just write that down so I don't forget.
Yeah, please.
It's a lot simpler because I've assessed a lot of these assignments. So believe me, it sounds like, oh my goodness, where am I going to get this, that, or the other from? It's extremely simple. This is why I love the communications unit, because once you've gone through the first 2 learning outcomes, which are a little bit more heavy in the writing, learning outcome 3 is nice and simple, and you can just cut back on a lot of writing in that section. You're still doing things, you're still explaining what you've written, but it's a little bit more simpler compared to the others. So we have this here, learning outcome 3, LO3 new, the PowerPoint that you can access on here. On here also, just to point out, because a lot of people don't see this sometimes, if you can see my screen now, this is the learning outcome 3 PowerPoint that I've just been going over. If you notice this here, footnotes, when we're doing these, if we've got a bit of extra information, we actually add in information. So in this one here, we've got information about the RNIB, the Institute for Blind People, where it shows what sort of services they offer. So it's always good to have this put. Sometimes this will be pulled down to here. It's nice to just pull it up a little bit and see if there's any notes, because that does help out quite a bit when you're going through your lessons. Yeah, so that's it today. Has anybody... oh, sorry, one more thing before I go. We've got this here, 3D1, Communication in Healthcare. That's right towards the bottom of where all the information is. And it just gives you sort of like a little summary. You can go through it if you have a few minutes. It's just tells you what sort of different communication happens in healthcare. It tells you about record keeping, what sort of happens when records are kept, what systems they go through, and so on. So it's a bit of a read. It's 11 pages, but if you have a bit of time, then it might be nice to have a bit of a scan through that. So yeah, so what we'll do is I'm going to turn the recording off now.